UFC 322 goes down on Saturday, and this is an awesome card. You have two super fights at the top, a super stacked main card, and then some really fun prelim fights. So I am pumped for UFC 322. I'm going to be diving into my full card breakdowns, main card, and the prelims, talking about every single matchup, picking a winner, and how I think they get it done. If you guys enjoy the video, hit the like button, subscribe. Timestamps are going to be in the description if you guys want to jump around to specific matchups. But let's start it off with Slava Claus taking on Matheus Camilo. And I believe this was like a late addition within like the last week or so to this card. But starting off with Slava Claus, he's super fun. Primarily a striker, pretty much entirely a striker. Clean boxing, has powerful hooks, nasty body work, also can mix in the kicks. He has kind of been on a rough stretch, 1-3-1 in his last 5 UFC fights. And over those last 5 matchups, he has taken a lot of damage. Also has some pretty questionable takedown defense, under 50%, down at 42%. But he is tough, right? He's not going to quit on himself. He can go late in fights, even if he has taken a lot of damage. On the other side with Camilo, 9-3 pro record, 0-1 in the UFC, lost his debut. Fairly well-rounded. 4 of his wins are by knockout, 2 by sub, 3 by decision. All 3 of his losses have come by way of submission. I actually thought he looked pretty decent in his debut. He won the first round on all 3 judges' scorecards, had a triangle that looked to be pretty tight on Gabe Green, but once he wasn't able to get that finish, like right after he let go of the triangle, he just completely wilted. He was done and ended up getting subbed pretty shortly after. So in this matchup, I can see Camilo having a lot of grappling success. We've seen that as a pretty big hole for Slava Claus. But then I also trust that if this fight goes later and it's like a kind of a grueling pace and Camilo can't find the finish, then I could certainly see Slava Claus kind of pulling away and even finishing Camilo later on in this fight. Going into this matchup, I'm going to be rooting for Slava Claus. I think he's fun. I think he needs a win to stay in the UFC, but I have to ride with Camilo here. I just feel like the grappling hole is too severe for Slava. So I'm going to go with Camilo by round 2 sub. Then up at middleweight, I know I'm going to butcher this name. We have Baisangur, Susurkaev taking on Eric McConico. This Susurkaev guy had the really impressive debut on the Contender Series, picked up the win, and then fought like 4 days later at UFC 319. The UFC is clearly very high on him. He was a minus 1,200 favorite going into that UFC debut, but actually had a pretty tough fight. He came out really reckless in round 1. Got caught late in the first round, was in some danger, but he beat up the legs, ended up finding the submission in the second round. It did seem like he was a little bit nervous, had some of the octagon jitters, but maybe isn't like the world beater that people thought he was going to be coming off of his Contender Series performance. On the other side with Eric McConico, he is coming off his first UFC win, a split decision against Cody Brundage. He's a solid southpaw striker. He has shown an ability to grapple pre-UFC. We haven't seen a ton of that within the promotion, but he's 35 years old. He's just kind of capped as an athlete. I think Susurkaev here is a little bit overhyped. Like, I don't know if he's future champ status. He was getting a lot of hype going into that debut. It wasn't a flawless performance. I still think he's going to get this one done pretty easily. I'll go round 2 KO. I think that's how he does it. Then going down to women's strawweight, we've got Angela Hill taking on Fatima Kline. And I think Fatima Kline is like champ upside here in this weight class. She is 8-1 as a pro. She's 2-1 in the UFC. Her only UFC and pro loss was a short notice debut up at 125 against Jasmine Jasdavicius. Like, that is pretty brutal matchmaking. I pretty much give her no fault in that loss, right? Up a weight class, short notice against a legit opponent. It's going to be tough to win that fight. Within the UFC, she has 2 finishes, ground and pound KO against Victoria Dudikova, and then a really impressive head kick KO against Melissa Martinez. She came into the UFC with a super grappling heavy style. She pushes a very high pace, but in her last fight against a striker in Melissa Martinez, she won that fight entirely on the feet, and like I said, found the head kick knockout. On the other side with Angela Hill, she's 40 years old. She's 1-2 in her last 3, and that win was actually a very close split decision. Like, Angela Hill has been on the wrong side of a lot of very close decisions. I think she finally actually had one kind of go her way when maybe it shouldn't have in that win. Hill's going to have a high striking pace. She's durable, very good cardio, but she has really struggled with her takedown defense. I just don't think Angela Hill is going to have like enough sting and power and danger factor on the feet to kind of override the controlled and ground and pound that I think Fatima Kline is going to put out there. So I'm going to go with Fatima Kline. I think she could be live for a finish, but I'm going to pick her by decision. Angela Hill hasn't been subbed, I want to say, since like 2016. It's been a while, a lot of fights. So defensively, she's been pretty decent in terms of actually, stopping the submissions. She is very durable. So I think Kline gets it done, but I do think it goes the full 15. Then a really fun matchup here. Chepe Mariscal taking on Pat Sabatini. This is actually a rematch from a fight that took place pre-UFC. Chepe won by split decision back in 2018. That was at Victory FC 60. So these guys have some history, but it was a long, long time ago. Like 7 years ago? They're very different fighters at this point in their careers. Chepe has a 5-0 UFC record so far. The dude's an absolute dog. Like, his strength of schedule within the UFC has been pretty solid, but he has potentially like the toughest pre-UFC strength of schedule I think I've ever seen, at least for like a dude not fighting in another like super legit, like a Bellator, PFL type organization. And so pre-UFC, he fought guys like Steve Garcia, Gregor Gillespie, Bryce Mitchell, Joe Anderson Brito, Yusuf Zalal, Pat Sabatini. Like, that is absurd to fight that many like legit established UFC fighters, and not dudes that just like made the UFC and kind of fizzled out, like super established guys within the promotion. Chepe's got a super strong output on the feet, 4.95 significant strikes per minute. He mixes things up really well, 2.85 takedowns per 15 minutes. He's not an elite athlete, but he's just really tough to beat. He's well-rounded, and he's not going to quit on himself. On the other side with Pat Sabatini, 7-2 UFC record. Both of his losses came by early knockout, like in a combined 2 minutes and 39 seconds. Sabatini is a dominant control grappler, 4 takedowns per 15 minutes, 48% takedown accuracy, and then he has submission wins in the UFC against Jonathan Pierce, Lucas Almeida, and Jamal Emmers. In those 4 decision wins, so he's got 7 UFC wins, 3 by sub. In the 4 that went the distance, he racked up 43 total minutes of control time in those matchups. He controlled 72% of the time in his decision wins. So just a super dominant grappler when he can get it rolling, and pretty much he's been able to get it rolling as long as he hasn't gotten finished within the first couple of minutes. I'm expecting a super competitive fight. The first one was a split decision. I think this one is going to be close also. Chepe within the UFC has not faced close to a grappler of Sabatini's caliber, but he's not easy to take down. And even if you can get him down, he doesn't accept bad positions. He's always working to get up. I don't see either guy coming in here and completely dominating. Like, I don't think Chepe is going to completely, neutralize the grappling of Sabatini. I don't think Sabatini is just going to park Chepe on his back for the full 15 minutes. What's kind of concerning me about picking Sabatini in this matchup is that he is a very good control grappler, but he doesn't land a ton of damage. His ground and pound is not really there. And so I think Chepe can outland him on the feet, do some work in the clinch, and even if he gets taken down and held down for a little bit, I think he can kind of create a margin on the feet and in the clinch that he might be able to win rounds, even if Sabatini has him down for, 1-2 minutes. So I'm going to slightly lean Chepe by decision. I think it'll be competitive. I think it'll be close, potentially controversial, right? This could be one of those damage, effective striking versus control time arguments, but I will lean towards, I think, the dog in Chepe. Then up at middleweight, we've got Gerald Meerschaert taking on Kyle Daukaus. Gerald Meerschaert, 3 straight losses to Mikhail Oleszejczuk, Reiner de Ritter, and Brad Tavares. He is a finisher, specifically as a grappler. 11 of his 12 UFC wins are by sub. He does really struggle when he can't find the takedown. Like, he is takedown or bust, 30% takedown accuracy, averages under 2 takedowns per 15 minutes, and he's actually gone 0 for 13 on takedowns in those last 3 fights, those last 3 losses that I talked about. On the other side with Kyle Daukaus, really got to feel good for the guy. He went 4-0 on the regional scene after getting cut from the UFC, then gets a short notice return opportunity, kind of a tough matchup against Michel Pereira, and he knocks him out in 43 seconds on the feet. Like, really a shocking result. I think, Daukaus certainly had a chance going into that fight, but I think the path to victory was going pretty grappling heavy, kind of wearing on Michel Pereira and winning like a control heavy decision, or finding a late finish against like a completely gassed Pereira. But he just went out there and smoked him on the feet. Kyle Daukaus is a very capable grappler. 11 of his 15 wins are by sub. He has 2 UFC wins. One was a submission win against Jamie Pickett. The other one was a super control, or now 3 UFC wins, but the 2 before the KO. The other one was a decision win against Dustin Stoltzfus, where he racked up 9 minutes of control time. We have seen that Daukaus has kind of lacked the physicality and athleticism against some of the better opponents he's gone up against, but his takedown defense has still been really solid at 82%. And so I'm kind of laying all that out to say that I don't think Meerschaert is just going to come in here and out-grapple Kyle Daukaus. Like, I think Daukaus is going to be very competent in that area, and I just think that Daukaus is the much better striker on the feet. So I'm going to pick Kyle Daukaus to win this fight. I've kind of gone back and forth on how I think he gets it done. I do think he could find a knockout, but that is kind of like a rare result that we saw in his last fight. So I'm going to pick Kyle Daukaus by decision. I do think he gets this one done. Now, going down to bantamweight, I think for a lot of people, this might be the most interesting prelim fight. We have Malcolm Wellmaker taking on Cody Haddon, and Wellmaker has a ton of hype behind him. 2-0 in the UFC, 1-0 on the Contender Series. All 3 of his knockouts were by right hook. He really does just have like the touch of death in that right hand. He's a big bantamweight, 5'10", with a 71.5-inch reach. He's got a really nice jab, good leg kicks. What kind of stands out is he looks a lot younger than he actually is. Like, I want to say he's in his early 30s, but for someone who's kind of so young in their career, specifically their UFC career, he is very, very composed. He's patient. He doesn't rush things. I will point out he is pretty untested in the grappling department. Not sure if we see that get super tested here against Haddon, but for the future, I will kind of throw that out there. I know some people think like Wellmaker, future champ. Not saying he's not, but I do think he's going to have to pass a few more tests before I'm willing to get there. On the other side with Haddon, you definitely can't sleep on this dude. 8-1 as a pro. His only career loss was to Steve Erceg, and I want to say it was like his 3rd pro fight. I think Erceg was like 6-0. Haddon was 2-0 at the time. Picked up a submission win on the Contender Series. Had a really fun decision debut against Dan Argueta, who obviously super grappling heavy, Haddon held up there, and showcased a really fun skill set on the feet. Boxing heavy striker, great cardio, pushes a high pace. I do think he can be a little bit loose on the feet, a little bit hittable, potentially overextend in certain spots. But I think in this matchup, he is a pretty capable grappler. So it'll be interesting to see if he kind of goes that route against Wellmaker. So I don't think you can sleep on Haddon. I think he's a legit threat in this matchup. But Wellmaker has the major power advantage. The way Haddon strikes, like the boxing heavy style, the fact that he does throw a lot out there, I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities for Wellmaker to land his kill shot, and I think he gets it in this matchup. I'm going to continue to roll with Wellmaker. I'll go round 1 KO. I think that's how he gets it done here. Then moving down to women's flyweight, we've got Erin Blanchfield taking on Tracy Cortez, and this does feel like a matchup that's pretty similar stylistically. Blanchfield, 7-1 in the UFC. Her only loss came against Manon Fior. She was a really dominant grappler in her first 5 UFC fights. In her 2 decision wins, she had landed 10 total takedowns, 22 minutes of control time. She also had 3 submission wins, within those first 5. But then her last 3, right, against Rose, Fior, Tyla Santos, she has gone 2 for 25 on takedowns. Both of those takedowns were landed against Rose Namajunas. And then on the feet, she is fairly limited. Like, she doesn't have a huge frame for the weight class. She's kind of got slow hand speed, but she will throw a lot out there. She is active on the feet. On the other side here with Tracy Cortez, she is 6-1 in the UFC. Her only loss came against Rose Namajunas. And I think she's probably a little less physically imposing than Blanchfield. I think the physicality isn't quite there. She has no UFC finishes. She has 0 UFC knockdowns. I do think on the feet, though, I think she's the more technical striker. Actually does have pretty solid boxing. She's pretty patient on the feet, lower output, very defensively responsible. What really concerns me about Tracy Cortez in this matchup is that her takedown defense is all the way down at 62%. Rose Namajunas went 5 for 5 on takedowns. Jasmine Jazz Davicius landed 2. Melissa Gatto went 3 for 6. And so like Cortez doesn't pull away on the feet enough for me to trust her in this matchup because I don't think she's going to take down Blanchfield. I think Blanchfield might actually be able to take her down and rack up some control time. And I think she'll need to because on the feet, I do think Tracy Cortez is the better striker. But I'm going to pick Erin Blanchfield to pick up the decision win. Then going up to middleweight, we've got Roman Kopylov taking on Gregory Rodrigues. Kopylov, 6-4 in the UFC, and he's a guy who has looked really dangerous against like non-top 15 opponents, but he's really kind of struggled once he's gotten into like the top of the division. He's a really sharp southpaw striker, nasty kicks, super powerful with the legs, works the body really well. We saw in his last fight against Paulo Costa, he looked pretty hittable on the feet, and he also just looked super tentative, like he was kind of worried about letting things go. Like Costa landed 99 of 159 significant strikes. Kopylov, right, against Costa, who's not known for his activity, Kopylov threw 55 less strikes, and he landed at under a 50% clip. So not great there. On the other side with RoboCop, he is a huge middleweight. He hits like an absolute tank. Also a very solid grappler, even if he doesn't go to it a ton. 6 of his 8 UFC wins have come by knockout. He's coming off a brutal left hook KO against Jack Hermanson. RoboCop is definitely willing to, give one to get one. He averages 5.5 significant strikes per minute, but he also absorbs 5 per minute. And then he has been knocked out in 4 of his 6 losses. He's a very good grappler, 88% takedown defense. He's been taken down 1 single time in his 10 UFC fights. Don't think that's going to be a factor with Roman Kopylov. Kopylov, pretty purely a striker. I think if anyone's grappling, it is RoboCop. I think RoboCop has the skills, the tools to win this fight. I think he can pressure Kopylov, stay kind of inside that kicking range. I think he should work his grappling, get into the clinch, strike in the pocket. Now, is he going to do that? I don't know, but the tools are there. I'm going to ride with RoboCop. I'm going to go round 2 KO. If I'm picking RoboCop and I think he's going to be aggressive, I think he's probably finding a finish if he wins. He's kill or be killed. So I'll go RoboCop round 2 knockout. Then I believe this is the featured prelim, Bo Nickel going up against Rodolfo Vieira. And I kind of want to rant a little bit about like the UFC's matchmaking of Bo and kind of how they've promoted him, because I really don't think they're doing him any favors. Starting off with some of the matchups, I kind of hate the matchmaking where they keep putting him up against like these very dangerous grapplers who are questionable strikers. And I understand like the overall idea where it's like you don't want him to just get like completely nuked on the feet. But I feel like when you match him up against guys with great jiu-jitsu, it makes him super hesitant to use like his elite skill, which is his wrestling. Like that's why you brought him into the UFC. You saw against Reiner de Ritter, like he went to it a little bit in round 1, but you could tell he didn't feel super comfortable. The Paul Craig fight was pretty brutal because he was just like, all right, I'm just going to strike. I don't want to run into a submission against Paul Craig. And we're kind of getting another one of those matchups. And then the other thing where they don't do him any favors, they keep trying to force his placement on cards. Like UFC 300 was the big one where I think he was on the main card, right, against Cody Brundage. And you had dudes like Yuri Prohashka, Alexander Rakic on the prelims. And it just like left a bad taste in fans' mouths. And it's not even his fault where he's getting placed, right? Like, I think he was initially listed on the main card for this one. It might have been the Dariush Benoit fight that was on the prelims. But even now, like, making him the featured prelim, it's not awful. But, like, the RoboCop Kopylov fight should definitely be ahead of this. And so, I don't know, not really important to picking this fight. But I just feel like they're not doing him a ton of favors. So in this matchup here, Bo Nickel, coming off his first career loss, was knocked out in the second round by RDR. Like I mentioned, he did look pretty uncomfortable in the grappling against someone who did have like the jiu-jitsu threat of RDR. And then on the feet, he's still pretty raw. He's very stiff. He looks undersized for middleweight. He's kind of just like that wrestler, jab, low kick, overhand in terms of his weapons on the feet. But he is still an elite wrestler. We cannot forget that. If he wants to go to that, I think he could have a lot of success. On the other side here with Vieira, he's a 4-time BJJ world champion, 6-3 UFC record. 5 of his 6 wins have come by submission. The issue with Vieira is that his wrestling is just not there. 23% takedown accuracy. When we're looking at some of his matchups, Chris Curtis, he went 0 for 20 on takedowns. Andre Petrosky went 1 for 11. Tresean Gore went 1 for 14. He has kind of struggled in some of these recent fights. to get the fight to the ground. And then on the feet, he is pretty limited, just kind of looking to grapple. In this matchup, I'm kind of expecting something similar to the Paul Craig fight. Like, I think we're going to get a bad stand-up fight, and I just slightly lean towards Bo Nickel there. He does have some power in the feet. Like, he's not the worst striker. We saw him, win a decision against Paul Craig, but I don't know if this is going to be super entertaining. I'll pick Bo Nickel to win by decision. Now we have arrived at the main card. We're starting off with Beneil Dariush taking on Benoit Saint-Denis. Dariush is just a tough out. He's super well-rounded. He's a solid striker, southpaw on the feet, really nice overhand left. We've seen him out-grapple guys like Renato Moicano, Tony Ferguson, Diego Fajeda. He's tough to take down himself, 82% takedown defense, even tougher to hold down if you can get him there. He is kind of getting up there in age. He's only 36, but just for like MMA standards, he kind of seems like an older 36. And then also the durability hasn't been great. He's been dropped in 3 straight fights. Obviously got finished by Arman Sarukian and Charles Oliveira prior to his win against Moicano. On the other side here with Benoit Saint-Denis, he had back-to-back pretty rough L's against Dustin Poirier and Renato Moicano. Then he's picked up back-to-back wins against Kyle Prepolek and Mauricio Ruffi. He pushes a super high grappling pace, 4.35 takedowns per 15 minutes. He's a southpaw striker, pretty hittable on the feet, only 42% significant strike defense. This is a southpaw versus southpaw matchup, which I do think kind of hurts Benoit because he really likes to rip that like left high kick, left body kick. That's not going to be available to him in this matchup against Beneil. And so I could certainly see Beneil getting nuked, right? The durability's been a question mark. We've seen him get, just knocked out in the first round, 2 of his last 3 fights. Moicano hurt him. I want to say that was round 1 where he dropped him. So that's certainly a concern. But I think if this fight goes long, I think Dariush is just the better fighter. Like I said, he's tough to take down. He's fine on the feet. We've kind of seen him stifle these dudes who have had some momentum. Moicano was one of them. Also, Matheus Gamrot, right? Looked like a super strong prospect. I think he was a big favorite against Beneil, and Beneil just like shut down the grappling and beat him up on the feet. I'm going to go with Beneil Dariush here. I think he wins a decision. Benoit is super explosive. He's powerful, has a strong gas tank. But technically, I just think Beneil is kind of on a little bit of a different level. So I'm going to pick him to win as the fight goes the distance. Then at 170, we've got 3 really fun matchups here at welterweight on this main card. We've got Leon Edwards going up against Carlos Prates. Leon coming off of back-to-back losses to Bilal Muhammad and Sean Brady. Leon really hasn't looked great in a fight or even good in a fight since like that 3rd Kamaru matchup, right? He had the back-to-back underwhelming performances against Bilal and Brady. And then even like the Colby title defense, like when you look at the version of Colby that was, the fact that he couldn't get a finish, that is kind of, troubling. Leon's a super technical striker. He looks really good in just like a pretty stand-up fight. He's lower output, can sometimes lack that urgency. Now, he can wrestle, right? We don't want to forget that 4 takedowns against Nate Diaz, 3 against RDA, 3 against Barberena, 3 against Luque. He certainly can mix things up. We just haven't really gotten to see it as of late because he's been going up against, Usman, Colby, Bilal, Sean Brady, all guys who want to take him down. He should be wanting to stay on the feet in those matchups. And I do think he should be grappling against Carlos Prates. Like, I know he's talked about how he's wanted to fight a striker. I don't think he should want to fight a striker to strike on the feet, specifically against Prates. I think he should want to fight a striker, if it is Prates, to actually try to wrestle him and take him down. For Prates, he is coming off a nasty spinning elbow knockout against Jeff Neal. All 5 of his UFC wins are by knockout. 20 of his 22 wins are by finish. 17 of the 20 are by knockout. He's got a super powerful left hand, nasty knees to the body, great front kicks. His grappling is fairly untested, like 84% takedown defense. Ian Gary did land 4 takedowns, but was only able to rack up 3 minutes of control time. I just think on the feet, Prates is too powerful. I think there's a pretty huge gap in terms of finishing upside, right? Like, I think Prates is just so much more dangerous than Leon Edwards. And then also, like, Leon's looked gun-shy in fights, right? This is a 3-rounder. He's not going to have the full 5 rounds. I'm going to go with Carlos Prates here, and I actually think he finds a finish. I'm going to go Prates round 2 KO. It's tough to fight Prates and go the distance. I know Ian Gary did it, but he even had his own issues later on in that fight. So Prates round 2 KO is going to be my pick. Then another matchup at 170, another potential number one contender fight. Sean Brady taking on Michael Morales. I do think this should be the number one contender fight. Like, I wouldn't put it past the UFC to give it to Cortez if he has a big win and, maybe Sean Brady or Morales kind of underwhelm. But specifically for Sean Brady, like, I think he's already deserving of a title shot. He's a super dominant grappler, 18-1 pro record, 8-1 in the UFC, coming off the round 4 sub against Leon Edwards. Really just broke him, dominated him on the ground, 5 for 7 on takedowns, 11 minutes of control time. In Sean Brady's last 4 wins, he has landed at least 5 total takedowns. 54% takedown accuracy is awesome. And he also just has great control once he does get on top. For Michael Morales, he is 18-0 as a pro, undefeated, 6-0 in the UFC. He's coming off a round 1 KO against Gilbert Burns. And Morales is just like a different kind of athlete. He is so explosive. He's a big welterweight, 6 feet tall, 79-inch reach, only 26 years old, so still really, really young, has a super high ceiling. 13 of his 18 wins are by knockout. So far, he's at an 89% takedown defense, but like his level of competition isn't even close to Sean Brady. Like I said, like his best win was against a super washed Gilbert Burns. So Michael Morales is still pretty raw. He's not the most technical striker. He's certainly dangerous, but he can kind of overextend. He can fall over his front foot. He's still pretty unknown as a defensive grappler. And like I said, Sean Brady is a massive step up in competition. I think Sean Brady's going to get this done. I think Michael Morales is really going to struggle with the takedowns, the top control of Sean Brady. I think Brady ends up finding a submission win. I think we could see Morales potentially fade in a fight style he's not super used to. So I'm going to go with Sean Brady, round 3 sub. Now, if Morales went out there and just like nuked Sean Brady in the first couple of minutes, I wouldn't be shocked. What I really want to see is like in a Michael Morales win, I kind of want to see him get tested a little bit. Like, obviously, it would be cool if he went out and found an early knockout. Like, I'm not going to, poo-poo that. But if we could see Morales, deal with a few takedown attempts and actually look good and, like, maybe find the finish in round 2 or round 3 or win a decision, I think that would be, very insightful for his, like, future upside. If he just goes out and, like, nukes Sean Brady in the first minute, you still don't really know what you have in terms of, like, the long-term grappling defense. So, really fun matchup. Could go either way. I think the odds are pretty close, but I am leaning decently heavily here towards Sean Brady, just way more proven against legitimate competition. And then we've arrived at the co-main event, Valentina Shevchenko, super fight against Zhang Weili, up at 125. I'm super pumped for this fight. These are two of the greatest women's fighters of all time. Valentina Shevchenko, back-to-back wins after the sub loss and then draw against Alexa Grasso. Valentina is just so well-rounded. She's a clean striker, sharp kicks, doesn't overextend, stays very safe on the feet. She's an efficient grappler, 2.6 takedowns per 15 minutes, 60% takedown accuracy. I still think she's like out of her prime at this point. Like, I don't think this is prime Valentina, but she is still going to be a very, very tough test for Zhang Weili. On the other side with Weili, I think her like biggest strength is just like her absurd athleticism. Like, she is a truly unique athlete, easily the greatest athlete of all time in 115, potentially like the greatest athlete ever in women's MMA. I do think she's going to be the smaller woman in this matchup. It's not like she was a huge straw weight, but like her explosiveness, her strength, I still think it's going to be there in this matchup. Maybe not to the same extent as straw weight, but like I don't think she's going to look completely outmatched athletically against Valentina. We've seen that in her last few fights, she's turned into a pretty wrestling-heavy fighter. Her last 3 decisions, 40 minutes of control time, 7 total takedowns. In the previous 2 fights before that, she finished both of them, but she subbed Carlos Esparza, and then she had the spinning back fist KO against Joanna. But if you remember, like that round 1, she messed Joanna up on the ground, was landing some vicious ground and pound, which then led into round 2, where she found the finish on the feet. Now, on the feet, she is still dangerous. She does have a lot of power, but I think she's a little bit more vulnerable on the feet than some people kind of think. She doesn't manage distance super well. She can kind of crash in over aggressively, and it kind of just feels like she always needs to be doing something. Like, she always needs to be throwing something out there. She's not necessarily setting things up on the feet. we've seen her get caught, right, in recent fights. Yan Xiaonan caught her, Amanda Lemos, stung her a couple of times. And Valentina can certainly punish that, right? If you're overextending, jumping into range, and, you're vulnerable, she will take advantage of it. So in this matchup, technically, I think Valentina is the better fighter. I think the big question is just like, how much does Weili's like freak athleticism translate to 125? Like, if Valentina lands a takedown, can Weili just like explode back to her feet and, get back up? In terms of like Weili's offensive grappling, I might be off base here. I have a tough time seeing her just like completely ragdoll Valentina. And like I said, like I could be wrong there, but I just have a tough time envisioning it. And then I think on the feet, like I think Valentina is going to do really well on the feet. I think she could even sit Weili down, kind of knock her off balance, potentially hurt her, drop her. So I am leaning towards Valentina here. And it's kind of also going to be a trend I talk about in the JDM Islam fight. I think sometimes people just kind of underestimate the like difference in weight classes, right? And how much size does matter. Like Valentina is established in this weight class. Weili's moving up. I know she's just like completely overpowered women at 115, but I don't know if she's going to come in here and do the same to Valentina. Like you look at Jessica Andrade, right? She had built some momentum at 115, picked up some solid wins. She moves up to 125, and like Valentina just ragdolls her and like treats her like she's like 3 weight classes below her, right? So I'm going to lean towards Valentina. I'm going to pick her by decision. I'm expecting a really fun fight. If Weili won, I certainly wouldn't be shocked, but Valentina is going to be the pick. And now we have arrived at the main event. Jack Della Maddalena defending his welterweight title against Islam Makhachev, moving up, the former lightweight champion. This is an awesome fight, but it does feel like there are a lot of unknowns in this matchup. Starting off with JDM, he really has one high-level win in MMA. Like, it seems crazy for someone who's the champion, but, right, the amazing performance against Bilal, his previous fight was against Gilbert Burns, who, like, at one point was kind of up there as a top contender. The Burns that JDM fought, I do think is pretty washed at that point. And then for Islam, this is kind of what I was talking about with Zhang Weili, but he is moving up to 155. We don't know like how his skill set's going to translate. How does the physicality translate? I do think people just kind of underestimate how someone can look and maybe what they can and can't do up a weight class. Like we kind of saw it with Israel Adesanya, right? Like he goes up to 205. People think, he's just the way better technical striker over Jan, and he's going to have some success there. And like he got taken down in the later rounds, even on the feet. Jan was super competitive. A lot of people did not expect that. But starting off here with JDM, kind of breaking down his skill set, he's such a fun fighter. I think he is clearly the best boxer at 170. He's not super fast. Like his hand speed isn't all that great, but he's very accurate. He hits hard. He throws super well in combination, can fight from both stances, can switch stances mid-combination. Great body work. Like he just works the body super well. Fights at a high pace, like nearly 7 significant strikes per minute. And then what I think is important in this matchup, he has shown some insane improvement in his takedown defense. You look at that March 9th fight, 2024 against Gilbert Burns. Burns goes 7 for 11 on takedowns, 5 minutes of control time. A little over a year later, May 10th, 2025 against Bilal. Bilal goes 3 for 9 on takedowns, with 3.5 minutes of control time. It looked like a completely different fighter. I thought JDM was a live dog going into that Bilal fight. I wasn't counting him out, but I also said, like I went back and looked at my notes, I was like, I just can't pick JDM with how bad his takedown defense looked against Gilbert Burns. And like, he completely turned it around. Now, there were some factors in that Burns fight. Like I want to say he went in with staph. I know he broke his arm at some point in the fight. So like maybe that was the big difference, but like, he also made some clear improvements going into that Bilal matchup. He's been working with Craig Jones. That really helped Volk in his matchup against Islam Makhachev. I think it's going to help JDM in this fight. And then he's not like amazing on the ground, right? Like his takedown defense isn't perfect, but he is smart. He understands the positions. I think he is fairly intelligent decision-making when he does get taken down. On the other side with Islam Makhachev, he's just so well-rounded. He's a great grappler. Doesn't have like that Khabib dominant control, but I do think he's a better submission threat than Khabib. Like submission wins against Charles Oliveira, Dustin Poirier, Renato Moicano, all in title fights. He's got that like nasty modified Darce, which he submitted both Dustin and McConico with. And then on the feet, like he's a really nice southpaw striker, definitely better like out at range than like in close, like boxing distance, but he's got great left kicks. He was very competitive on the feet, right? You can say he even won fights on the feet against Volk. I'm not looking at the second one because short notice, but like that first fight, right? He was super competitive with Volk on the feet, going shot for shot, and then also very competitive in there with Dustin Poirier. Just like I said for the Valentina Weili fight, I'm expecting a competitive matchup. I don't think one person is going to come in here and completely blow the other one out of the water, but I keep thinking about the first Volk fight and then the Dustin Poirier fight with Islam Makhachev, where down at 155, even though he's winning these fights, right? In the Poirier one, he did find the finish. He is in these pretty competitive matchups against one Volk in like a 145er moving up. And I know Volk is an all-time great. I'm not trying to discredit Volk here, but he's in like a life or death fight with Volk. And then with Poirier, I do think his grappling defense was like the best it's ever been at that point. But like that version of Poirier on the feet is like a shell of what he was in his prime. And those were, pretty competitive fights. Islam is not a huge lightweight. I know some people like to say he's like a weight bully. I just don't think he is. When he fought at UFC 311 in California, they released the fight night weights. Islam was 178. Also on that card, Grant Dawson was 179. Moicano, who he fought in that main event, was 182. So like Islam is not some sort of massive lightweight that I think he's going to look like huge at 170. And so, man, I'm just kind of leaning towards JDM. I think the size difference is going to be noticeable. We've seen him kind of struggle to stamp some of these rounds against Volk. And even Poirier, right, was able to have some of these rounds on the feet. You've got JDM, who I think striking-wise is just way better than Dustin Poirier at that stage in his career, right, going up against Islam. Maybe like the takedown defense is worse, but I'm just leaning towards JDM here. Certainly I could see Islam winning. I think just like pound for pound perspective, right? Islam is the better fighter, but him moving up, I do think that's a factor here. So I'm going to pick JDM by decision. I'm super pumped to see how these super fights play out. As you can tell, I have kind of sided with like the current champions, the bigger opponents in this matchup, but could certainly see both of those fights going either way. If you guys enjoyed the video, hit the like button, subscribe, drop your picks down below. Who do you guys have in the main, the co-main on the main card? But thank you all for stopping by, and I'll see you in the next one.